Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sara Lihz and I am super excited to share this card project with you today. We're going to do a little bit of fun fold, which is my normal stuff, and then a little bit of easy coloring. You guys, we're going to color and I love it. They have all of these new stamps at Trinity. They're from Love Dani. She designs them and these are the perfect size. They're about half the size of an A2 card. I'm using Life is Tough, but so are you. I love how encouraging these are, but there are a bunch of them and I'm going to show you a bonus card at the end where you could switch up the color scheme and do the same sort of thing. So I'm starting with an A2 panel, really anything bigger than the stamp. Okay, we're going to ink blend, we're going to color, we're going to die cut it out. I've sped up the blending a fair bit because it's not fancy. It's not. I'm just putting down a bunch of yellow ink on one side and pink on the other. I will say both my ink pads are a little dry, so it took more than normal to get that panel covered, but I prefer to start with a lighter ink and to blend more and just add more and more ink than to start with a mid-tone and then things get blotchy and I struggle a little bit. I overlap them a bunch so there's a little bit of peach running through the middle, and I have put that into my Misty. I'm using Memento ink to stamp this the first time because I'm going to color it with alcohol markers, but I'm going to leave that stamp in my Misty so we can re-stamp later with a darker, more vibrant black ink. For my coloring, I'm using Ohuhu alcohol markers. I would say they're great beginner markers, but they're actually just great markers. It's an alcohol marker like a Copic or an Olo, and I love them. I've been joking lately that I don't color in videos, and it's true I don't because it can take a while and I'm a slow colorist, and then my head's in the way and editing my head out of the frame is tough. But this is super simple. For the Life Is up at the top, that is just pink on pink. I'm just making the letters darker than the ink that we blended, and it's super forgiving because you already have color back there. So the pink is my RV200. And then for the U, I came in with my Y050. And then at the very top, it starts to hit that peach. So I started with a dark peach. That's my YR070. It was a little darker than I thought it was going to be. I could have tested it on the side, I suppose, but it did not. So then I brought in my YR030 just to make that blend a little easier. But I am just sort of quickly going over where those colors meet, because alcohol ink is transparent. So you can still see the ink blending through it, and it just gives you all kinds of wiggle room. On the really thin letters, I didn't do any blending at all. I just picked a color. And then for my hearts at the top and bottom, I'll bring in a couple more colors. I started with the same yellow as I used for the U, and then I'm bringing in my Y2 and just flicking from that bottom corner just to add a little bit of variation in color. And then I'll do the same thing up at the top, but with my pink markers. So it's the RV200 for the base of those hearts. And then I will bring in my R10 as sort of an accent, flicking from the bottom and bringing that up. I'm a teacher and I can always use more encouraging sentiments. My kids and their teachers can always use more encouraging sentiments. And I just love this stamp. I love all of these stamps. And again, a bunch of them just came out and I'm obsessed. I'm absolutely obsessed. I have never colored so much in a single month, and it's been so much fun. I'm adding a little bit of shimmer pen. It's my Nuvo shimmer pen just on top of the hearts and the word tough. And then I'm going to let that dry a little bit. After I give it a few minutes, I'm going to bring it back to my Misty. Remember, we left the stamp in there, and I'll just line that back up in the bottom right corner. And I know that it will line up perfectly. For this second time around, I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's a black pigment ink, and it's so crisp and beautiful, and I love that. So here I have a standard card base that's 11 inches by 4¼ and I'm going to cut 2 inches off of one side. So now it's 9 inches by 4¼ inches. I'm going to score it at 5½, just like normal. So the back of my card is going to be a standard A2, but then the front of my card has a short flap. And that's going to let us create this super fun sort of flip-flop mechanism. To build this, I'm going to cut out my stamped image with the die that goes around the outside, but there's also a die that cuts out the U and it cuts out some hearts. I'm loving that we have dies for these stamps. We don't always get that with the Love Dani stamps. Some of them are huge. They cover a full A2 panel. And so this is super fun and something a little bit different. I cut a second piece of white cardstock using that same die just to cover up the back because it's got a bunch of like alcohol marker that bled through it. This is a 2-inch circle that I die cut out, and I'm scoring it in half, so just at 1 inch. I'm doing 2, but I'm only going to use 1. I wasn't sure at the time, and then I will press those with my bone folder. We want them to fold as flat as possible. On the front of my card, I'm going to begin assembling these pieces. The circle is the piece that lets my image rotate from the outside to the inside of the card. So I'm adding glue only on half of that circle, and I want it to fold and wrap around this pink piece of cardstock, okay? It's really important to glue it to this piece and not to the card base. Doing it this way ensures that there is enough room for that circle to truly fold open and closed. Then I will add glue all over the back of that. The piece that I have is 3 inches by 4 1/4, but certainly you could make it cover that entire front flap. I'm just gonna do a little blue accent right on the edge there. And so that one is a 1/2 inch by 4 1/4. I just grabbed a scrap and I'm gonna tuck it right up against that. And then I'll use my scissors and I will trim off the side. So I have cardstock covering that short flap, and I have a 2-inch circle folded in half, kind of tucked in between the layers. I wanted some added interest on the colored cardstock, and so I have the Abstract Scratch background stamp. It's one of my very favorites, right? It can read masculine, it can read feminine. We're gonna do it really subtle here. So I have tucked this into my MISTI. If I had a sticky mat, this would have been easier, but I couldn't find mine. And then I have masked off the back of the card and that little circle flap because we're gonna emboss on here, and I didn't want sticky embossing ink or embossing powder getting on there. I'm going to press that firmly. I'm just using Versamark ink, and then when I take that out, this is a really subtle embossing powder. It is clear with some glitter. So my colored cardstock will get just a little bit darker and shinier, and it'll have that sparkle from the glitter. Because this is pretty subtle, I work very methodically on a piece this size. I start in one corner and I go in a line across, and then I go back the other direction just to make sure I don't miss anything, because I have missed things before. And then you've got all of that unmelted embossing powder kind of flaking off the card, and it makes me so sad. So I'm very careful here. I'm going to give this one more good press, and then we will start working on the inside, the piece that you can see when the card is closed. This is the Rainbow die set. This is an old favorite. I've cut a ton of them. I number them on the back just to keep track of like which one goes where. If you were going to put the whole bow on a card, that would matter. We're going to cut off the edges, so it maybe doesn't, but it helps me make sure that when I assemble another rainbow later, I have the pieces that I need. There's also a cloud border die in there, but I almost never use it. I don't even think of this as a rainbow most of the time. You wouldn't have to do all 7 pieces. I love putting strips of cardstock on my cards. I think it's a really great way to use up scraps and a great way to just add a little bit of easy interest. And so this to me is just another take on adding strips of cardstock, which I love. When I go to add these, I have them hanging off the top and the bottom, and then they're going to hang off the side. So again, it probably doesn't matter what order I put these in. I did kind of go in rainbow order, right? From my greenish blues to my more like purpley blues, then into my purples. And then at the very end here, I'm going to use a little bit of white glitter cardstock because there's that glitter on the front of the card. And I wanted that to coordinate for there to be that extra pop of something, right? The sentiment is really trying to like lift someone's spirits. And so I just thought that was a really fun way to do it. Once I get everything glued down, I'll just use my scissors to trim off around the edges, but certainly you could use your trimmer if you're more comfortable that way. When I go to add my sentiment, I want it centered right on that line where the pink cardstock overlaps the back of the card. And once I get it there, I'm going to add a little bit of mint tape just to remind me of where I want to put it. I don't want to smear that glue on the back and then risk getting that on the inside of my card or on my pink cardstock. And so I'll line that back up, and then I'll kind of press and remove my extra pieces. And then I can pick it up and get my fingers really in there. I'm going to give that a really good press. But that is it, my friends. Look at that shine and sparkle. And then when you open the card, that sentiment flips to the inside. It just sort of follows you. It stays with you. And I love that for this one. We'll take one last look at a couple close-ups of this card, one of them to really let you see the coloring. It's not fancy, and that ink blending helps so much. And you can use that technique so many different ways. This is another card. This one's just a flat card, but it has that same sort of ink blending and then my alcohol markers on top of it. My friends, I hope this inspires you. I hope you'll give this a try. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.